My apologies for that. I was not paying attention to the time. This is a live show. I know they were running a pre-record, and my apology. I just was not looking at the clock. Welcome to the show. It is Friday, April 19th, 2013, end of the week. Thank goodness it's Friday. Sam is in our control room. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're ready to take your phone calls. Program note, Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of the show today. And Monday, of course, Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth will be joining us for the show. Now, pardon me, I'm out of breath. I was running up the stairs. Whew. That's what I get for not getting the coffee soon enough here. All right. It's been a crazy, crazy week, been a crazy night. We're watching this situation that's going on in Watertown, Massachusetts, following on the Boston bombing. Information's coming in thick and fast. I was up late last night monitoring the situation where they had had the shooting on the campus of MIT. Then there was followed by car hijacking, where the hijacker said, "Hey, we're the Boston bombers. You know, please be sure and tell the police that when you finally get to talk to them about that." And the story keeps changing. It's very, very confusing. And we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to get into some other news because the corporate media still, this is the only thing they're reporting. There is other stuff going on you need to know about, and that is why we are going to be covering more of these other stories here. Basically, to just recap on it real quick, we have, during the course of this last week, seen multiple names, multiple suspects, all kinds of changes to the story. A lot of it is really not making a lot of sense. The father of these two brothers, who are being claimed to be the bombers, has gone public saying that he believes his sons were framed by U.S. government agencies. I tend to believe him, mostly because the background of these two kids just does not jibe with this idea that one day they decided they were going to start blowing up a bunch of people. Now, we're going to take a break for commercials. I'm going to catch my breath, sip my coffee, and we'll be back here and get into the show and come into this with a little bit more depth. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And again, this is a live show. It is Friday, April 19th, 2013. We're talking about the aftermath of the Boston bombing, the identification of two suspects, one of whom is now dead, the other is still at large. Right now on the corporate media, more of the family members of these two boys are coming forward to say, no, it could not be them. It is just not in their nature. And especially when you look at the older brother, the one who was killed last night, and there's some very bizarre circumstances about that. This guy, Tamerlan, he's somebody you'd want to be friends with. Very successful, drove a Mercedes, martial artist, was training for the Golden Gloves, wanted to represent the United States in the Olympics. Does this sound like a guy who's just out of a clear blue sky going to decide to blow up a bunch of people? Even with an entire case of SSRIs in his bloodstream, I don't think you're going to find that in his character. I think they just grabbed the first people they could make a case against and didn't realize that the people they had pointed the finger of blame at, weren't going to check out on the background. And I'll give you an interesting little story. When we were looking into the background of Tamerlan, we found these websites with like photo galleries of him working out. He's got a lovely girlfriend. This guy had all things going for him. He had a bright future to look forward to. Why is he going to throw it away on this single bombing? No prior indications or history of anti-American animosity. It just isn't there. Nothing on his social media, anywhere. He was into his martial arts. He was into his girlfriend. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Now, last night, I stayed up all night watching the media coverage of the manhunt through Watertown. And just before I went to bed, CNN showed a video of a man they had arrested, and the police had gone to the extreme step of making him strip in the street before they put him in the police car. Now, the video was a little blurry. The face kind of sort of looked like Tamerlan, but you couldn't really tell for sure one way or the other. But one thing was very obvious, very muscular physique. And if you look at the photos of Tamerlan working out for his martial arts, that's the same physique. And they were saying he had been arrested, he was put into the police car naked. I guess they wanted his clothes for something. And he was not reported as injured or anything. And then you get up this morning and all of a sudden they're saying he was shot in the street, his younger brother ran him over, he's dead, oh gee whiz, we can't ever talk to him about who he was working for. So the situation is just getting really, really weird. NBC is now saying they're looking for a third bombing suspect in the bombing situation. And it's just a very, very strange story, what's going on. They're crafting an official story, just like they did around Lee Harvey Oswald. And it's a good point to make there, because remember, when Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested at the Texas Theater, he started shouting, "I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest," because Lee Harvey Oswald understood, as the patsy, he had to be killed so that he could not answer any questions, and that the plan was for him to die while fleeing the police. So he simply went passive, said, "I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest," and that made it impossible for the Dallas police to kill Lee Oswald while they were out there in public. So a couple of days later, Dallas police officer Ray Vaughn lets Jack Ruby into the basement of the Dallas Police Department so Ruby can shoot Oswald and tie up all the loose ends. Ray Vaughn was then promoted to Chief of Police of Midlothian, Texas. Doesn't get any more obvious than that. So I'm wondering why MIT. I mean, the police officer who was shot at MIT was in his car, shot multiple times, was not out of his car, was not confronting these kids. Just was plugged there. Why MIT? Even though Tamerlan had ambitions to go to MIT, they were not students there. Why did they go to the campus? Did somebody say, "Hey, meet us here, we'll get you out of the country," in order to set them up? Was this some kind of an FBI entrapment operation? Were these two kids approached and told that their path to U.S. citizenship would be made smoother if they would only volunteer to play bombers for the bomb drill that we now know was going on during the marathon? A replay of the London 772 bombing, where there was a drill simulating multiple tube bombings going on at the exact same time, at the exact same location the bombings happened. And we know that someone in the week before that London bombing was going through the Muslim neighborhoods trying to hire guys to be pretend make-believe targets for the drill. And so those guys who got on the London trains probably thought they were carrying practice make-believe bombs and didn't realize that they were real bombs until they went off. That could very easily be the case with these two brothers. They thought they were going to make a little extra money and, help the U.S. government so they could become U.S. citizens. And they may have thought the backpacks they had were just props, and they were just going to plant them as part of the exercise and see if the bomb squads could find them, and didn't realize they were real bombs. There are all kinds of ways to set patsies up. And remember, the photos of these two kids at the marathon, especially the younger brother, got the cap on backwards, no sunglasses, completely unconcerned if they're going to be photographed. Does that make sense with somebody who's really planting a bomb? Wouldn't they be keeping their head down, the baseball cap forward, visor forward, pull down, sunglasses, knowing the area was just flooded with cameras? It just isn't making any sense at all. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. Blue in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Blue. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I wanted to bring up a story. Actually, I'm out of Tennessee. And the story is so horrific for children's civil rights, but it's something that needs to be brought to the Drudge Report, I'm hoping.
Well, I'm unconnected with the Drudge Report. Can you make it brief, please, because we do want to stay on topic today.
Okay. Well, this is a little girl who is charged with delinquency of civil rights. Her crime was she dropped a piece of paper that had a not-so-nice note to a teacher that had gotten her in trouble. She didn't attempt to turn this paper in. There's no indication that she did. But they arrested this child.
Well, we're seeing a lot of the militarization of the schools. We know that kids are being kicked out of school just for pointing their finger and going bang, bang, or having a picture of a gun or a drawing of a gun or nibbling their Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun, and we're seeing this all across the country here. So it's part of the background noise, and thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to John in Montana. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John, are you there? Hello, John?
I pulled him up, but he's not responding.
Okay, fine. John, I guess, dropped. So we're going to go back here and talking about the Boston bombing and the aftermath. Frankly, my opinion is this is another fraud like the Oklahoma City bombing, and today is the 18th anniversary of that. We know in the aftermath of the Waco disaster, and today's the 20th anniversary of that, how much the government lied about what was going on, and they'll spare no expense to craft this whole theatrical illusion to convince you that the U.S. government is always right, and these people who died are bad people, and you should have no sympathy for them. And I think certainly the majority opinion out here in the independent media is this is yet another in an endless series of government deceptions to get us to go along with wars of conquest, to not question, to put up with crotch gropers and the rest of that stuff. However, let us speculate for a moment. These two kids did act alone. Good students, good athletes, bright futures ahead of them. No prior indication of animosity toward America, and then all of a sudden they just decide last weekend, hey, you know, we're kind of bored, there's nothing good on TV, let's get a couple of pressure cookers and blow up the marathon. I know it's a bit of a reach, but just for the moment, let's speculate that they did act alone. Did they not have motive, given decades of wars by the United States against Muslims on behalf of Israel? Yes, it is a terrible thing that 3 people were killed in Boston, but how many Muslims have been blown to bloody bits by Obama's drone strikes? Innocent people. Not combatants, not enemies, just people going around their own community, leading their daily lives, and suddenly there's a blinding flash and an average of 50 innocents are killed for every one drone strikes. How long would you sit still watching your fellow Americans being killed at random before you'd consider striking back? Are these 2 boys really any different than the French underground striking back at the Nazis? And if these kids did act alone, as we are being assured by the corporate media and the FBI, it proves that all this surveillance on America does not work. All the email scanning, all the phone call listening, all the social media data mining. The FBI actually admitted on air they were able to go back over the last 2 weeks of social media traffic looking for some kind of clues who might have done it. So everything you're doing on your tablets and your smartphones and your Facebook and all the rest of that is being stored somewhere and made available to law enforcement, even before this CISPA bill was passed. Your communications are being saved and scanned, and none of that worked. The FBI still had to go to the public and say, hey, do you have any idea who these guys are? So all of that surveillance costs a huge amount of money, destruction of our Constitution, and it did not work. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with John in Montana after Hello, these America. words. Welcome back to the show. And again, we're hearing from the family and friends of these 2 kids. There were no indications that these 2 kids had any animosity toward Americans, that they were involved in blowing things up. They're not believing it. The father has already said, he says his kids were framed. I tend to believe him. Now, we were talking before about this photo gallery showing Tamerlan in a very positive light. He's with his girlfriend, he's working out, he's training in his martial arts, he's got a Mercedes, he's dressed nice. He looks like a successful young American, wanting to, basically build a future, and he's got a very good future. He'd won scholarships, was going to apply to MIT, which is a very, very difficult school to get into. Just not the sort of person who one day wakes up and says, I think I'm just going to go ahead and blow up a bunch of marathon runners, just for the heck of it here. And as soon as I linked to that photo gallery showing Tamerlan in this very positive light, the page gets taken down. Now, earlier today, as I mentioned, the uncle of these 2 boys gave a television interview in which he said the boys could not have done it. Russia Today posted it on their website and to YouTube. But if you go to YouTube now, you get the message, the uploader has not made this video available in your country. Ha 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 ha. You may not watch the video of the uncle saying the kids couldn't have done it. Now, for those who follow Russia Today has never, ever, ever before put up a video on YouTube that was not viewable inside the United States of America. So I'm starting to smell panic among the propagandists. People are not buying the official story, and they have good reason not to. I got a very angry email earlier today about, you should really give the government the benefit of the, you should trust your government more. Really, you're harming the government by not trusting them. Well, trust has to be earned. And after all the other lies, whether it's the Kennedys' assassinations, Martin Luther King, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Saddam's nuclear weapons, and on and on and on. Obviously, at this point, the American people don't trust the government. There was a corporate media article saying 30% of the American people do not, only 30% of the American people trust the government. We ran our own survey. It came out 98% of Americans do not trust the government. So if the U.S. government and the FBI and the CIA and the corporate media have a credibility problem right now, it is of their own making. And this idea that they can put on this dog and pony show and have us once more fall back into line to attack the designated enemy isn't working. And it's like I've been saying, the people who are running these things inside the bowels of power are still thinking the world is still the way it was back in the 1950s and the 1960s, where they could wave commies at us and we would soil ourselves. But that world is gone. It doesn't exist any longer. And it is the result of all those lies. Saddam's nukes, USS Liberty, 9/11 itself, that the American people are not predisposed to accept this story at face value. And if they're running around the net shutting down YouTube videos and photo albums this blatantly and openly, it signals a panic. They know they are not being believed. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. John in Montana. Aloha, John. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right. Just watching this, of course, the drive-by CNN, and the National Guard choppers are landing at Dartmouth. They're blowing up a house at Cambridge. They've locked down 1 million people, but, the agenda that we know they're on. And what I seen earlier this morning were buses that said police on them, and they're going door to door. And how fast can they move these people to FEMA camps in an emergency, saying, we're going to make you safe. Don't leave your house. We'll come get you. And it's just been, I got off work last night at midnight here and turned on the TV, and that's when it all escalated from the guy getting shot there at MIT, and then next thing you know, they had 100,000 troops in that area to lock down 1 million people. And don't leave your homes. We'll take care of you. Just to be safe, get on the bus here, and we're going to take you somewhere. And that's just what their agenda is. You know that.
Well, I think the agenda is to get Americans used to the idea of police-declared lockdowns in their community, and certainly the idea is to limit the possibility of public witnesses to what is being done. Because if they did pull a fast one, if that naked guy last night was Tamerlan, and he was arrested alive and healthy, and then this morning he's dead, then obviously they're trying to get rid of anybody who might say, hey, I thought it was a practice terror drill. We were told by the U.S. government that we could get money and a boost to citizenship and all kinds of other things if we would just help the security people run their little terror drill. You got to get rid of the patsies. That's what they did with Lee Harvey Oswald. And as far as... okay. Hang on. We're coming up on a commercial break. I'm going to keep you through so you can talk in the next segment. And by the way, somebody just sent me a photo taken from a window of Watertown, and it looks like, it's a complete ghost town. Nothing on the streets at all. It looks like one of those horror movies from the 1950s when the planet has died or something like that. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with John in Montana. John, you had one more comment you wanted to make.
Yeah, it was just shown so easy how they can lock down 1 million people and go door to door and light off their own explosives, which I thought a lot of stuff. I fire a few rounds in the air last night and tell everybody that now it's a manhunt, and now they got another guy to look for, and they've shut down transportation, they've shut down the Amtrak, they've locked down Boston, and like you say, this, it's another Manchurian candidate.
I don't think these kids are Manchurian candidates. I think they're patsies. I think they got set up. I think they basically looked through the crowd for anybody that looked, Muslim, and said, okay, we're just going to go with these two. I mean, I'm looking through all those photos from the marathon myself. I'm seeing, guys with backpacks acting far more suspiciously than these two kids did. And again, the point that I keep coming back to is especially the kid in the white cap, the younger brother, the one who is still at large, did not make any effort to conceal his face, knowing there were thousands of cameras around. Wore his cap with the visor backward, no sunglasses, face fully on view. If you were walking into a crowded area full of cameras and you were going to plant a real bomb, would you not keep your head down, the visor on your cap forward and down, wear sunglasses, try and hide your identity from all the cameras you know are there? It doesn't make sense. What makes the most sense is these two kids thought they were working for whoever was carrying out the bomb drill that we knew was going on at the same time at the Boston Marathon. That's been confirmed. Bomb squad was there. Bomb dogs were there. Spotters up on the roof. Even the marathon runners were saying they'd never seen so much security at a Boston Marathon before.
Right now, Michael, it says Cambridge, Mass. Warning: a controlled blast. Cops will detonate materials later at Norfolk Street, and it's showing them in Humvees with machine gun turrets.
Yeah, definitely they're using this to sort of condition Americans to, stay in their homes, don't look out the windows, don't take pictures, don't talk, don't tweet, don't whatever. Anyway, John, phone lines are really loading up. Got to let you go. We're going to switch over to Bill in Idaho. Aloha, Bill. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, good afternoon, Mike. I just wanted to mention the 17th, 6:19 in the morning NPR, and I was hoping somebody was copying all of NPR, if not recording it, considering the content last night. Did you happen to catch any of it?
No, I did not. I was watching the CNN and Fox News feeds about the manhunt in Watertown.
Yeah, very important. I believe that the Grand Soviet imposition is in progress as we speak. I just wanted to...
I'm sorry, the what? The what?
The Grand Soviet, the takeover.
I'm sorry. That's a little bit of a reach. For one thing, the Soviet Union is gone. I hate to be the one to break this to you. Obviously, you were very fond of them, but the Soviet Union went away quite a few years ago. All right, so I don't think.
I would be able to finish my statement, considering how busy we are. I would mention that considering the marathon, it would be quite something if the repeat of the same history down in Texas were to occur, only by virtue of the fact that there are marathon LPG tank farms, Boston Harbor.
Okay.
Wouldn't that go along with Eliza Spiegel and Dr. Jeff Greenberg's discussion of death coming?
Okay, we're kind of wandering a little far afield here, and Bill, we're going to let you go because I want to keep this show on topic and not be gratuitously and possibly professionally dragged off topic here. Now, more comments from people who knew these two kids. Now one of their high school teachers has gone public saying, no way did these kids carry out these bombings. So more and more people are going public. Apparently, the Twitter accounts of these two kids may have been hacked into, because starting on Tuesday, after the bombing, all kinds of provocative, inflammatory statements were on their Twitter accounts. But again, looking back before Monday, not an indication at all. And of course, the problem with Twitter is it is easy to break into. And so you don't know if the person who's tweeting something is really that person or not. Major propaganda. We already know that. Just as soon as the bombs went off, they were screaming, it's North Korea, it's the NRA, it's those gosh darn Arab Muslims. It turned out to be Central Asian Muslims, and dragged Russia and Chechnya into the mix as well. All righty, let's see here. Now, what I was talking about before in the last segment, when they start taking down the videos of the uncle saying these kids could not have done it, when they start taking down the online photo albums that show Tamerlan as a really up-and-coming guy heading for the Olympics, you know they're in a panic. And one of the reasons they may be in a panic is because the reporters in these press conferences are starting to ask some pointed questions. So even the corporate media seems to be not really buying the official USDA choice bovine excrement on this one. Apparently, during one of the press conferences held by the FBI, one of the journalists asked them, what about this bomb drill that was going on? And they're, oh, no, there's... And they harump and act indignified. Apparently, Jay Carney, during one of his proclamations, was asked by a reporter if airstrikes that kill innocent civilians should be considered as terrorism. So the corporate media, at least the rank and file, we know the executives and owners of the corporate media are in lockstep with whatever this agenda is. But even the rank and file corporate media is starting to ask some important questions, which means they'll probably be out of a job really, really soon. All right, let's see where we are on the call. We got a lot of callers. Nathan in California. Aloha, Nathan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, thank you very much, Michael. Aloha to you, too. I just wanted to let you know I'm an ex-Bostonian.
So am I.
Yeah. Well, Winchester, Massachusetts initially, and then came to California, and I've been to Hawaii, and we can talk about that later. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted you to know I lived on Gloucester Street, which intersects Boylston, which is the last 3/4 of a mile of the Boston Marathon race. But I just wanted to say very quickly that I have been over to MIT. And when I was there, they have student recreation centers that are open 24 hours a day. So you can just walk in, and I've done it. I'm not a student, and you can go watch TV, sit there, read a magazine, do whatever you want. So, you know, you say, well, what are the kids doing at MIT? There are probably recreation centers all over the place that are open 24 hours, and that's my 2 cents. And the only other thing that I'm confused about is I saw this article on ABC News. The father said, if you kill my other son, all hell's going to break loose.
Yes, he did say that.
What in the world does that mean?
It means he's a father who loves his children, and he's emotionally distraught that he's already lost one son and may lose another, and he's very angry that his kids seem to have been set up as some kind of patsies in this thing. I want to go back to your comment about MIT. I'm very familiar with MIT. My father went there. I was born in Boston, but for the first few years of my life, I did live in Watertown. So I'm looking at these pictures and saying, oh, yeah, I vaguely recall what that looks like. But your theory is that these two brothers, who may have thought they were part of a bomb exercise only to discover after the fact the bombs they planted were real ones, and their picture is on TV, they're wanted people running from the police, but they're just going to take a few minutes out to go over to MIT to take advantage of the recreational facilities. That's your theory?
Well, not necessarily, but I just wanted to say that there's recreational facilities, at least one that's right off of Mass Ave, right? Well, I'm sorry, if I had just either accidentally or deliberately blown up the Boston Marathon and my picture was all over TV, recreation's really going to be kind of low down on my my list of things to do at that particular moment. I'd be thinking about shaving off my mustache and beard, bleaching out my hair, buying completely different clothes, swapping license plates on a couple of cars and skedaddling. I agree. That's the only thing I could think of as to why they might have been over there at MIT, because of the 24-hour-a-day recreation center.
Well, I can think of another reason. You know, somebody said, meet us here at MIT and we'll make sure you get out of the country safely.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Yes, I will.
All right, we're going to switch over to Ethan in New Mexico. Aloha, Ethan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Those pictures you put up and they're not available at the original site of the guy they killed.
Yeah.
I can't stumble them either.
Yeah, they're all being deleted. You know, the only pictures we're getting on the corporate media are the ones from the marathon, and these other pictures that are all dark and they make him look brooding, and they're trying to basically recast him as this evil guy who could very easily do these kind of things. And when you dig into what this guy's real life is all about, you know, if I had a life with that much future promise to it, I'm not going to be thinking about blowing up marathon runners. I'm going to be thinking about that hot little girlfriend I have. I'm going to be thinking about, you know, training for the Golden Gloves, training for the Olympics, you know, getting that scholarship, trying to get into MIT. This is a guy with a lot going for him. It doesn't make sense that out of a clear blue sky he would do something like this. It's just not.
I can't even stumble the pictures that you put on your website. Stumble won't allow them up.
Oh, you mean you can't put them up on Stumble?
I can't put the ones you put on your website up on Stumble. They will not.
That is very interesting.
They do this occasionally on other really controversial stuff, but these guys are the patsies. It may have been like the London bombing where they gave these guys these backpacks and put them out there, and another FBI sting that went live again.
Well, you know, it really does make sense if you think about it. I mean, what the bomb squad is supposed to do is find and disarm bombs. If you're having a bomb squad drill and there are no bombs, they just get to stand around and eat donuts and drink coffee.
It looks funny, like all those contractors that were standing around with the earpieces in their ears.
Yeah, it turns out they work for a company called Kraft International.
Right, the sniper guy that was killed by the PTSD guy. That's his company, I think.
It's basically was started and is staffed by former Navy SEALs, and apparently Kraft International copied that skull logo from the Navy SEALs to put on their caps. So when you see that skull logo, it isn't saying Navy SEALs, it's saying Kraft International. I think their motto is something like, violence can be a solution. And they're like Blackwater. They are hired paramilitary mercenaries is what they are.
I've seen 5 or 6 guys in all the photographs. Some of them are basically in uniform with boots and cargo pants like those 2 guys, and some are wearing the hat, and I don't know whether they're Punisher fans or whether they have had all their people wearing hats with the Punisher emblem on there, but there's other people that aren't wearing uniforms wearing those same hats.
Well, that emblem, again, I know it appears, a variation of it appears in Punisher, but it began as the emblem of the U.S. Navy SEALs. Then when these former SEALs started Kraft International, they adopted it as their company logo. And so that's what the hats are. They're company caps.
They weren't holding an exercise. How come all these contractors are out there? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, but again, if you're going to have a bomb drill, you got to have some bombs there. And the only question is, were they fake bombs or did they turn out to be real? And it does seem to be a repeat of 7/7 here. Got to let you go. We're getting a lot of phone calls. I'm going to grab Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. As you and your guests just now have gone over, the fact that these guys, they're contractors, the fact that there's a drill, the fact that there's a drill and they're hiding the fact that there was a drill. And the contractors alone, means they're spending a lot of money. These guys normally wouldn't show up at the Boston Marathon. And then I love that maybe these Chechen guys, they had facial recognition or something. They could pin it on right away. I mean, who knows? But it's interesting to me how they the knee-jerk reaction, which has always been Al Qaeda, no longer is a knee-jerk reaction because it's clear that Al Qaeda is us. That Al Qaeda is working for us in Syria. Mm-hmm. It is working for us in Libya, in Mali, and all these other places. And now it's pretty clear. So they never talk about Al Qaeda anymore. You don't hear that anymore at all.
Well, we're hearing it a little bit. Certainly in the Israeli media, they're saying, "Oh, this is all tied in with Arab Muslims and Al Qaeda." And have you ever noticed this very interesting, subtle phenomenon, if you will, in the corporate media, When a white guy goes out and commits a crime, they treat him as an individual. When a black guy goes out and commits a crime, it's an individual. When a Mexican goes out and commits a crime, they treat him as an individual. But when the suspect is Muslim, then it's all the Muslims. All the Muslims are behind. It's a collective defamation.
You don't hear about that at all.
No, you don't. Some white guy robs a store and they say, "Oh, those whites, they're behind this." And you'd get laughed at. But in this country, if a suspect happens to be Muslim, then it's those Muslims doing that. That's what the propaganda is trying to do. And apparently this 26-year-old female Syrian physician was attacked walking down the street in front of her baby by an assailant who said, "You're the ones who made Boston explode." And you need to remember, go back and look at Nazi Germany when Hitler's brown shirts went out and committed acts of terror to be blamed on the socialists or the Jews. This is nothing new with governments pulling these kinds of stunts.
The Reichstag fire.
Reichstag fire being the most obvious.
Yep. But Mike, it's so apparent that they never, what used to be just automatic, Al-Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
You never hear anymore because there's been a clear line drawn that Al-Qaeda is us.
Well, I think there's two other factors going on there. First of all, the U.S. government's official position is that they've destroyed the core of Al-Qaeda. Now they can't come back and say, "Oh, Al-Qaeda's reborn and it's the big threat that it was before," because that damages the credibility of the U.S. foreign policy, that all these wars are supposed to get rid of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's all but gone. Okay, well, we can't really rope them in to this thing other than peripherally. The second thing is that more and more people like you understand that Al-Qaeda is completely made up. We've got all these phonies running around claiming to be Al-Qaeda. Adam Gadon, his real name is Adam Perlman. Yusuf Al-Khattab, his real name is Joseph Cohen. Amzi Al-Amerki, his real name is Zachary Chesser, and they're all phonies and fakes. And it's the current incarnation of Emmanuel Goldstein, a manufactured enemy we're all supposed to blame for everything, and we're supposed to vent our 2-minute hate on. And like I said yesterday, look at the media. Oh, we've got to get the terrorists. We've got to get the terrorists. No talking about that huge fire down in Texas. Don't want to upset the corporations who were cutting safety corners. All the problems in the world are all on the terrorists. Peter, got to let you go. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. A student who went to college with one of these two brothers just got interviewed on CNN saying exactly the same thing. Happy kids, very much loved being in America. If you look at their early life where they were born and grew up in Kyrgyzstan and had to move around a lot, and they were just in the middle of all that horrible stuff, and they came to America, and it was like coming to heaven, and they loved being in America. And everybody they're interviewing is saying, it's just not credible. Nobody is buying this story. And that is why we're seeing the government panicking on this, and we're now hearing from over on INFOWARS that their posts to Facebook of their stories regarding these black and tan uniformed men, Kraft International hired mercenaries, are now being blocked. As soon as they post an article on Facebook, it's taken down. They are panicking out there. All righty, I think our next caller is Mark in Michigan. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you, too, Mike. I've been waiting for a long time to say that, and I mean it. I do enjoy listening to you. I have a question that I'd like to put to you just for your opinion, and then I'm going to give you what I think is an interesting observation. I am starting to think that this was supposed to be an in and out, where they were going to capture the guy, take him to the courthouse, and it was going to be a conservative Tea Party type, pro-Second Amendment, white guy, and we got him, and they were going to demonize, and here we're back to the guns. But that blew apart, and now there is this chaotic contingency plan that's being put into place where there is so much stuff being thrown against the wall, a lot of it absurd, like stopping to rob a 7-Eleven, etc., that now they're just going about whatever they're doing and creating mass chaos to totally distract from the original false flag. What do you think of that?
Well, I think the confusion is that something may not have worked according to plan during that false flag, because remember, when they did the London 7/7 bombing, the plan was the bombers were blown up with what they thought were practice bombs. These two kids may have just said, let's just go ahead and do this early. We're not really on a schedule, and they put the bombs down and walked away, and they went up, and they didn't have conveniently dead terrorists to wave around on the media. And that's what started all this nonsense about, with the New York Post and all the rest of that. And now they've had to basically track these kids down and eliminate them by hook or by crook before somebody else gets to talk to them and finds out, hey, there's something really wanky about this. But again, from what I can see, from all, even the people they're trying to interview on the corporate media are all saying, no, we're not buying this. This isn't in the nature of these two kids. Bloomberg is out there talking about Tamerlan's background, and they're saying that he wasn't Olympic level yet, but he could have gotten there. He had that much potential. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with another phone call after these words from our sponsor. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. Joseph in New York. Aloha, Joseph. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Aloha to you also. Last night, I was just scouring through the YouTube, and I found a 2-hour program called A Noble Lie.
Mm-hmm.
In reference to the 1995 Tim McVeigh and the Murray Building situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think Alex Jones has one of his documentaries, so I don't know which way to go. But anywho, I am telling you, it was an eye-opener on what our government has been doing to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was in New York for the 10th anniversary of 9/11 with Richard Gage, who we're going to be talking to again on Monday, the point I was making in my presentation was to go back and look at all of the lies and deceptions. Pearl Harbor was not a surprise. Roosevelt not only knew the Japanese were coming, he deliberately provoked them into doing it, and then acted like it was a surprise to anger the American people into throwing their money and their babies onto the Japanese bayonets. There were no torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. There was no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. It goes on and on and on. The Lusitania was, in fact, carrying war materials, which made it a legitimate target for the German U-boats. And 9/11, USS Liberty, all of these things. And when you go back and you understand the extent of the lying by the U.S. government to control and trick and deceive the American people, you come to understand that Boston isn't a unique, unusual event. It is business as usual. What is Go ahead.
I agree. I was, believe it or not, I'm a big Imus fan.
Yes.
And he does get some good authors on there. And I can't remember the guy's name, but it was autobiography of Teddy Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm.
And Teddy Roosevelt, according to this author, was the original starter of setting Japan up for what they did to us.
Could very well be. Could very well be. The further you look, the more you realize that the American people are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. There is almost no truth and accuracy coming out of the U.S. government, certainly not about the economy, or from the corporate media. They're lying about everything except the weather and the sports scores, and they're not even all that good on the weather.
Oh, yeah, in the video games.
And in the video games. All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. I just posted a link to that video at whatreallyhappened.com if you want to go look at that. And again, in the midst of all of this brouhaha about Boston, something the federal government probably doesn't want the American people remembering is it is the 20th anniversary of the FBI's assault on the church in Waco, Texas. It is the 18th anniversary of the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, and that is rife with all kinds of evidence that that, too, was a government operation to propagandize the American people to be afraid of domestic terror. And it just goes on and on and on. This is all they know how to do, is fraud and deception. They don't know how to run a country on the basis of honesty and accuracy and truthfulness. They don't. They've been doing it the other way for so long. Institutionally, they don't know any other way. Got to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. One other anniversary on this day that you should remember. Today is the anniversary in 1775 of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And that's Concord, Massachusetts, not Concord, New Hampshire. And these battles came about because the British government decided they were going to confiscate the military weapons of the citizens' militias. And so they started marching in, and of course this is what triggered Paul Revere's ride and William Dawes' ride, and the British are coming, the British are coming. Oh, who cares? Well, could I sell you some Revereware? And, of course, it didn't work out well for the British, and that was really the start of the American Revolution. And that's probably a little aspect out of history they don't want you thinking very much about as Obama's gun grab kicks into high gear. And given how the schools are already teaching our kids that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to you, you don't like guns, you don't want guns, I wonder if they mention the battles of Lexington and Concord anymore. I know the public schools don't teach about the Currency Act. And by the way, there's this wonderful video that I linked to from whatreallyhappened.com. Remember yesterday we had that 19-year-old kid call in, obviously very clued in, and I said, this gives me hope for the future. When the young people, when the next generation are starting to figure this stuff out. That's the most positive sign I've seen in a long time. And then I got this video today of these two little kids. They made a video about the Currency Act. And they get it. They understand what was going on with the Currency Act and how it led to war and revolution. So, anyway, I'm going to get off the Boston thing. I got a lot of other stories I want to cover, and I got to get them done before Claire comes in here at the top of the next hour. In response to Boston, New Jersey, Senator Frank Lautenberg wants to pass a law to regulate black powder and gun reloading supplies. And because you can always take bullets apart and pull the powder out of them, he wants a limit on how many bullets you can buy. You go in and you say, I'm going to go target shooting. Well, how many times are you going to pull the trigger? That's only the number of bullets that you get here. And further proving that there is still too many lead pipes up there in Washington, D.C., apparently there's this congressman down in Texas who says that Middle Eastern terrorists have formed links with the Mexican drug cartels, the one that Fast and Furious is giving all the guns to, and they're being trained on how to pose as illegal aliens sneaking across the border. Now, of course, my attitude should be, let's close that border, if that really is a threat. But they're really reaching out there, just trying to maximize the impact on this. And apparently a lot of his own constituents just came out with this, oh, come on, attitude. Now, remember those Ricin letters? Now, first of all, the guy who was accused of sending the Ricin letters has denied it. He says he's innocent, he's being set up. Apparently, recently he's been working as an Elvis impersonator. So in order to stop these horrible attacks on our president and our members of Congress, it is time to ban Elvis impersonators. But there's an interesting dimension to this story, because remember these Ricin letters were sent a week before the bombs went off in Boston. And it appears this Kevin Curtis, who sent these Ricin letters, may be the same Kevin Curtis who blew the whistle on a major body part scandal a few years ago at this hospital he was working at, which wound up turning into a huge legal mess. People lost their jobs, lawsuits, civil litigation. Maybe this was somebody's idea of payback, because frankly, if you're going to send a letter with Ricin or anthrax or whatever in there, you don't sign your real initials to it. But this guy supposedly did. We're being told that this guy sent these letters representing felony assaults on the leadership of this country, and he signed his own initials to them. If you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction to sell you. Now, moving on to some other stories. As we're probably already aware, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the CISPA bill. This is the bill that allows the government completely unrestricted access and sharing to all of your online data. Every database, every email, every tweet, every Facebook, every whatever. It's all open season on your communications. No warrants required, no such thing as a Fourth Amendment. Because we've got to save you from acts of terror. Hasn't worked so far. It turns out apparently the CISPA went to the floor for a vote without allowing any debate. They just ramrodded that thing right on through. And that may have been part of the intention of staging this Boston bombing at that particular moment. Remember when 9/11 went off and the anthrax letters started showing up in Congress? And they voted that USA Patriot Act through into law without even bothering to read it. So that's how insane that gets. All righty. So let's take a minute here to talk about Oklahoma City. First of all, it was well documented. There were additional bombs inside the building. It was reported in the corporate media, and then, of course, 2 days later, oh, no, don't pay attention to that anymore. This is the new official story. We had General Benton Parton, who was the military's top expert on explosives, saying that that truck full of ammonium nitrate and fuel oil could not have done that damage. Remember, the Murrah building was a federal building, and federal buildings are built much stronger, much tougher than ordinary building code buildings are. Same thing with Building 7 at the World Trade Center. Because it housed federal government offices, it was built extra strong and extra tough, and should not have just collapsed down into its own footprint from a couple of office fires here. And then, of course, there's the story about the second Ryder rental truck that was spotted by a pilot over a U.S. Army base. And there was this whole little facility. You got to go in there and look at the pictures. You won't believe it. Where there's this little screen set up. They're just way out of, the public flow, and they're off in this little tiny corner of this military base about halfway from Elohim City to Oklahoma City. And they have a Ryder truck there and a bunch of other stuff around there. And remember, witnesses reported there appeared to be two Ryder trucks. The one that was rented there in Oklahoma City was old and used and beat up, but the truck seen in front of the Murrah building was brand spanking new. And a lot of deception there. One of the most interesting things about this is that the FBI spent something like 14 days browbeating a witness to testify that he'd seen Timothy McVeigh with the truck in front of the Murrah building. And after all that browbeating, they decided they couldn't risk putting him on the stand during McVeigh's trial because it would have fallen apart under cross-examination. So you need to go and look at some of those Oklahoma City links that I put up there. And the other one you need to look at, given that it's also the anniversary, is about Waco, Texas. And there's been a lot of stuff about Waco, Texas, and the deliberate incineration of these people. They were gassed to death with a gas that's illegal to use on enemy troops in time of war. It's called CS gas. And as a propellant, they were using a chemical called methylene chlorate, which is highly toxic. It's the chemical that they use. Have you ever been to a salad bar and they have that clear plexiglass scoop thing over it to prevent you from dropping dandruff into other people's food? How they bend that plastic is to expose it to methylene chlorate. It will physically melt your bodily tissues. And they just poured that stuff into the church, and then they tried to sell the story, oh, they just committed suicide, they set themselves on fire. Except that the autopsies on the surviving remains showed no smoke inhalation in their lungs. So they were dead before the fire started. You can go out and dig up that stuff. We're not going to reprise it all here. Got a couple of phone calls. Greg in Montreal, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Yes.
Just a little bit off topic from what you're talking about.
Really?
For the past 2 weeks, I'm trying hard. I'm having trouble reconciling about that 757 that crashed into the Pentagon. And
I win the bet, Claire. All right. Listen. All right. One more time. The perpetrators of 9/11 had to get rid of that plane and its passengers anyway. Why not crash it into the Pentagon? What is to be gained by pulling a subterfuge? Hundreds of witnesses saw that plane flying to the Pentagon. There should have been an equal number of witnesses seeing it flying away from the Pentagon. So unless you're up there with the Starship Enterprise and a giant transporter that can grab an entire airplane out of thin air, this is a classic case of poisoning the well. It is a propaganda tactic that any time the government is trying to keep a cover story in place and the public is getting a little too close to the truth, they throw some junk out there. So the corporate media can say, oh, those silly people, they don't even believe a plane flew into the Pentagon. And it's an old tactic. It's old enough to shave, and it's certainly old enough where we all recognize it when we see it. Whether it was the Umbrella Man during the Kennedy assassination, that was a poisoning the well stunt. The fingerprint man witness on Jim Garrison's trial of Clay Shaw, who was later admitted to have, yes, been a CIA contract agent at the time. It's an old tactic, and the no plane at Pentagon is the one that they have been using on 9/11. And the question nobody can really answer, besides the fact, hey, everybody saw it going to the building, nobody saw it going away, the real question is motive. Could they pull a fraud? Maybe, maybe not. Why would they bother? Okay, we're going to take another break here before we take more phone calls from the online propagandists. And real listeners. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a lot of people are still wondering what happened over at the JFK Presidential Library. Because it was announced ahead of time there was going to be a bomb drill exercise involving explosives over there. There were also all these other police reports of unexploded bombs being found. Then they said, oh, it was just an electrical fire that happened just when the bomb squad and the first responders happened to be sitting around eating donuts and drinking coffee. So it's kind of a very bizarre situation here. Now, earlier in the week, the New York Post, of course, put out one of the many pictures, or, oh, this is the suspect, that's the suspect. And they even said right in the news, there's no evidence linking them, but they look right. In other words, they looked Middle Eastern. It turned out to be a 27-year-old track coach and a high school athlete who obviously would have no legitimate reason to be there watching the Boston Marathon. And so the kid is now saying he's afraid because his picture was out there on the New York Post, and he's afraid to go out of his home now because people are just attacking. Get those gosh darn Muslims for the Boston bomb. Get those gosh darn white people for Oklahoma City, and all the rest of that stuff. So let me see. To recap, there was the CNN story that they had a suspect under arrest. There was Reuters putting out an obituary for George Soros, and, of course, the New York Post photos of the completely wrong suspect. So all in all, it's been a bad week for the corporate media's credibility. Something to keep in mind as they come out and say, well, this time we've got the real truth, and we really, 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 really mean it. We're going to go back to the phones here. Jim in Georgia. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I've got my thoughts, and my thoughts are a lot of these people, or not a lot of them, but some of these people do these things for the reason to get their name in the history book. In 50 years from now, you and I will not be remembered. These people will be in the history book, their names.
Well, again, I understand that there are some people who do these things because they want to get their names in the history book. But again, look at Tamerlan. He was on his way to the Olympics. He didn't need to do something else to get into the history books. He was on his way.
He was right. He was a Golden Glove boxer, and
yep.
Zeke and
okay. All right. I think Jim just dropped, so let's move along from that. Now then, I want to talk about what happened down in Texas, because today that is scarcely getting a mention. on the corporate TV news. They're referring back to it from time to time, and yeah, 12 people died and 50 homes got destroyed, and yeah, it was a really big bang, but we're back to Boston and terror, 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 and these Muslims are on the run and they've got explosives and blah, blah, blah. They're just trying to keep the focus on there. Now, here is the perspective. 3 people died in Boston, and yes, that is a tragedy for the families involved and for those who were wounded. It is a terrible, terrible thing. But obviously what happened down in Texas, in terms of the real lives lost, the number of people wounded, the property being damaged, was far worse. And we know there was a problem there. And we know there should have been a solution. It turns out, and we were reporting yesterday where there were some permit violations that sort of weren't being dealt with. It turns out the OSHA, their last inspection of this fertilizer plant was in 1985. And even back then, the company was fined for serious violations of how they were storing anhydrous ammonia. So we know why this fertilizer plant blew up. Management was cutting corners on safety, and the United States federal government didn't do its job. We have the culprits right before us. Where is the non-stop, now on 5 days news coverage of this travesty? And it's like I pointed out yesterday, we have these very real problems in this country, and we know who the culprits are. And we know what the solutions obviously would be, and the corporate media, we're too busy talking about Jodi Arias and Michael Jackson's doctor. But when they have an explosion in Boston, oh yes, it's those evil Muslims, we must get them, because ready for war, we're going to attack everybody. It's a very obvious bias in the corporate media, because it is the corporate media. And it's tangled up with all these corporations that are doing things like selling bad vaccines and not maintaining proper safety standards, not maintaining the safety equipment they do have, which was the case down with the Deepwater Horizon disaster. No acoustic blowout preventer. The manual blowout preventer was 4 years overdue on its maintenance, and when they needed it, it would not work. And that was why we had the Gulf oil disaster. Did they throw those people in jail? Did they fire the Minerals Management Service for not doing its job? No. Obama goes down and swims in water that's kind of sort of maybe near the Gulf of Mexico, but not actually in it, it turns out, and says the Gulf seafood is safe. Go on buying and consuming, and all is well here. Going to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to grab some phone calls. Moose Girl in Wisconsin. Aloha, Moose Girl. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, aloha, Mike. I just wanted to say that they pretty much have been telling us they're going to do these false flag events. At the Boston Marathon, there are witnesses that say this is just a drill, nothing to worry about. And with this West Texas fertilizer explosion, there was actually a planned drill for the hospital in Waco called Operation Black Rain. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody's aware of that. But
well, we're aware of it. It's been sent to me. My understanding is the drill actually got called off, and Waco is 20 miles away. The fertilizer plant does appear to be a genuine industrial accident. It certainly makes the corporation that owns it look very, very bad. I think if anybody was going to, the ATF did go out there to try and find evidence of terror, and they basically drew a blank, which is why the corporate TV news isn't spending much time on it.
Right, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is if you ever hear of them doing a drill, be on the lookout.
Oh, yeah, well, we definitely agree with that one. But the other side of that, of course, is that they are always conducting drills. And a lot of the drills are just legitimate drills to keep these people trained up. But usually it's an indicator of something nefarious going on when there is a drill that exactly overlaps the act of terror. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. We know that FEMA was on the ground in New York the night before 9/11. We know that there was a drill simulating a multiple-tube bombing in London during the multiple-tube bombing. There was a drill going on in Madrid. It is almost a classic hallmark. And we understand one of the reasons for the drill is to have an enhanced presence there to control the scene, to make sure that only the official story is allowed out, and also to make it look like the first responders really get there Johnny on the spot quickly. And a lot more than a few people have commented on how quickly FEMA was there in New York after 9/11 and how long it took them to respond to Hurricane Katrina or even more recently Storm Sandy, where it just takes them forever to get organized and get in there. It was interesting. Some of those first FEMA responders in there were having to ask the civilian and church food banks for lunch. That's how poorly prepared they were, because you have to remember, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is not about taking care of the American people, despite its public relations to the contrary. It's about preserving the continuity of the U.S. government against the American people. Same thing the Department of Homeland Security is all about.
Right. Okay, Mike, well, I'll let you go so you can take another call. Thanks for taking my call.
You've got it. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Calling about the Texas explosion. I wasn't aware of what that lady just said about a drill, and you pointed out that the drill in Waco was canceled, and that it was over 20 miles away. But in West Texas, 20 miles can be a run to the convenience store. And even if they did cancel the drill, the hospital would have made preparations for an influx of patients and to be ready for that. So it could have, been there to, they would have done...
I disagree. I disagree because, again, when you have something like a bombing at a public event like the Boston Marathon, people will say, oh, this is obviously an intentional attack against people. But a factory blowing up, especially when it was kind of at night and the fire started, and we already know they were mishandling their anhydrous ammonia. And you need to remember back to the Texas City disaster, where a ship full of ammonium nitrate exploded and devastated the area. These kinds of industrial accidents do happen, and I do not go along with people suggesting that this was some kind of a terror attack.
Okay, yeah, no, another thing about it is begs the question, what percentage, that was a pretty big facility, what percentage of the fertilizer utilized in American agriculture was produced by that place, and will we see a shortage of fertilizer, or will it affect food prices and all that sort of thing? That's one side question about it.
That's an interesting question, but I would imagine that probably the other fertilizer companies are ramping up production even now to cover the shortfall and take advantage of the increased sales.
Right, and hopefully there's sufficient capacity to make up for the loss. And then the one last thing I was going to say is, even assuming that it is an accident, it's certainly reflective of the fact of that American business ethics has so degraded under utilitarian ethics, such that the end justifies the means, and corners are always cut for the bottom line, and, there's really lost sight of the importance of doing things correctly. I wish we had more...
I agree with that.
More Scotties out there who would over-engineer things and then not put the real spec in the book because it exceeded what they printed.
No, I'm absolutely in agreement with that one. Under this current social ethos of profit above all, I think the Ferengi took over Wall Street some years ago. But under this ethos of profit above all, everything is just engineered down to the bare bones minimum. And the idea that it might blow up and cause damage, they just treat it as a cost of business. We've certainly seen that in the pharmaceutical industry, where they put out these brand new patented synthetic medications and they start causing problems, and they figure they're making so much money from the medication they can just pay off a few lawsuits and that will be that, okay?
Right, yeah, the old rationale used to be over-engineer it, then you don't have to worry about warranty claims and lawsuits, but they're too stupid to do that.
No, they're too greedy, because the cost of over-engineering something so you didn't have to worry about the warranty cost more money than making something cheap and replacing a few of them under that warranty. We're certainly seeing that with electronics. And again, when I was a kid, which was admittedly a long time ago, along with the idea of wanting to make a decent wage or salary, we were raised with the idea of just taking pride in our work, of wanting to make a good quality product that would endure. But this whole planned obsolescence, the corporate leadership, they want the products to fail just outside of warranty so that you are forced to buy another one. The last TV set that we had failed just 3 weeks inside the extended warranty that we had bought. And turned out there were no parts for it. Nobody wants you to repair these things. The model is throw it in the trash, buy a new one. Had we not had the extended warranty, we couldn't have afforded to replace the TV set, so we definitely lucked out on that one. Thanks very much for the call, Glenn. Going to let you go here. And before I take this next phone call, just a comment I wanted to make here. I'm a big fan of National Geographic. I read it a lot. At my age, National Geographic is kind of a fun magazine because when you're at my age reading Maxim, I feel like I'm a child molester looking at those young girls. So I do the whole National Geographic. I just got the most recent issue where they're talking about bringing back these dead, extinct life forms, which is an interesting exercise, but they're not going to repopulate entire extinct species with this technology. But I couldn't help but noticing, flipping through this National Geographic, was ad after ad after ad after ad. Did you live on this land under which fiber optic cable went? You could share in a class action settlement. Did you take this medication? You can share in a class action settlement. Did you have this car? You can. And it was just leaping out. You know, all these ads, you could be part of this class action settlement as our nation deteriorates, as the products become poor quality and more harmful. This idea of suing the corporations is becoming big business. And the corporations, it's cheaper to make a bad product and make a lot of money off of it and then settle the lawsuits than it is to make a quality, durable product. We saw, you know, if you go back and you look at the history of planned obsolescence, it reached a point where American industry said, we're losing money if we make quality products because people will buy them and use them forever and ever and ever, and that doesn't work for us. We need light bulbs to burn out after only 1,000 hours. We need heavy appliances to die after just 5 years. Cars are engineered to last only 8 years for the high-end models and only 5 years for the low-end models. They literally control the galvanization on the steel so that after 4.5 years it starts to rust and rust through very quickly so that you'll get tired of driving that old rust bucket and you'll run out and buy a brand new car on credit. And that's the business model. And it's a very destructive of the economy because we're all working as hard as we can just to stay where we are. We're not building for the future. We're not making progress. We're working and spending and borrowing and spending just to stay where we are, to always have a working car, to always have a working computer. And that's destructive of society. It's destructive of the economy. And, of course, it's hideously destructive of the environment. Because they dig up all these natural resources or they conquer somebody else's country and take those resources and they stamp them into the latest little gizmo which you buy and you use for 6 months or maybe a year, throw it in the landfill, and they start the process all over again. And you see all these environmental people screaming about global warming and pollution and the rest of it. They never talk about this very destructive planned obsolescence methodology. They never talk about that. It's always about, you must pay carbon taxes, you must obey a global environmental authority. And yet the single most destructive approach to the economy to the environment with this economy based on planned obsolescence, they don't talk about that for some strange reason. I'm going to go back to the phones. Michael in New Jersey. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just have two things. I heard there was a video that the FBI has of the guy actually playing the bomb. I haven't seen it. I don't know if anybody has. And then the other thing is I would love to hear an interview with the guy's girlfriend. So just want to see if you would have any comments on that stuff. I'll let you go. Thanks, Mike.
Well, you're welcome. First of all, what the FBI has is a video of the suspect planting a bag. And again, if these two guys were actually, if they thought they were part of the bomb exercise, then yeah, they're going to plant the phony bomb. As far as the girlfriend, I would actually love it if the corporate media would leave the family and friends alone. And they may not go back to the girlfriend because so far up to this point, interviewing the friends and family has turned out to be a public relations nightmare because they're all out there saying, no way could these kids have committed these horrible acts. It just defies belief. And again, if the U.S. government and the corporate media are facing a crisis of credibility, it's their own fault. I know from their point of view, oh, it's that gosh darn independent media, and it's that gosh darn Republic Broadcasting, and it's that gosh darn what really happened. They're out there telling the truth, and we need to catapult the propaganda forward. But, you know, after decades and decades of lies, prudence demands that we never accept anything the government or the corporate media tells us at face value. And I think what is becoming very obvious from the reaction to the Boston bombing, and certainly from their running around shutting down various videos and web pages and blocking Facebook posts, is that the majority of people aren't buying the official story on the Boston bombing. And the government's trying to back up and regroup and figure, how do we get this? How do we sell it? It's not going to work. And I have been telling you this for years, and I presume that the government assets who monitor this show on behalf of the government have been taking notes that that beautiful, easy-to-rule, easy-to-deceive nation of the 1950s and the 1960s at the height of the Cold War does not exist any longer. The Internet has transformed the fundamental way in which information flows through society as dramatically as Gutenberg's rediscovery of movable type printing. The old methods will not work any longer. I think their public reaction to Boston pretty much confirms that. Now, those institutions that can evolve to deal with the new information environment will survive. Those institutions that cannot evolve and adapt to the changing environment are doomed to extinction. In the case of the United States government that is having to prop up so many lies over so many decades, I don't think they have the ability to evolve and adapt. I think Boston proves it. I was saying earlier in the week, it had to be an act of utter desperation for them to try this stunt. Or it is simply a case of institutional fossilization. They're still living in the world of the 1950s and 1960s when these kinds of things would work. And so they're very much out of touch with what's going on. Quick phone call, George in Texas. Aloha, what's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I know you're talking about credit. You know, the only thing I noticed on the TV is just throwing at your face constantly is these car title loans. Since the banks no longer own the cars, I think they're trying to find a new form of lending to get that car back under their ownership and put everybody back into debt.
Well, that's what a lease is all about. And yes, for a lot of people, leasing is a little less expensive than a car loan. But the thing is, at the end of the lease period, you are required to turn the car back in and get a new car and a new lease. So instead of having a 5-year car loan followed by maybe 2 or 3 years where careful maintenance will allow you to continue driving what is now your car, now it's a 3-year lease followed by a 3-year lease followed by a 3-year lease followed by a 3-year lease.
Well, you know, the thing is, a car dealership offered me 10 years of payment on a car instead of 5 years.
Because nobody is in the financial position. If you're not in the 1%, buying a new car is very difficult. I'm driving a 12-year-old Honda right now. I know it's not going to last for very much longer, even though it is in great, great shape compared to newer cars, certainly compared to that POS Nissan Xterra that we had. But, you know, trying to get a new car loan right now, I don't even want to try and apply for one in the current economy.
Well, you know, the thing is, I went to the state auction. I bought a nice car, a Pontiac, a 2000 Pontiac Grand Prix with the engine overhaul at the county auction for $500.
That's a good deal. That's a really good deal. I may look at doing something like that, trying to find an auction or something where I can pick up a confiscated vehicle.
Oh, I mean, sometimes nobody shows up at these auctions and say $1. I walk off with the car for $1, Mike.
Well, that's probably a good thing to look at, but of course America's corporate culture is you have to buy a new one of whatever on credit, or the system starts coming apart. You know, and right now we're all learning how to be our own mechanics. We're not, and you know, modern new cars are designed so the regular driver owner really can't do a lot of maintenance on them. I discovered that on the Xterra. This 12-year-old Honda I'm driving right now, I can open that hood. Wow, I can fix this myself. It's simple. It's elegant. It doesn't have 5 million computers in there trying to, you know, take care of me from myself, protect me from myself. I like simple, elegant cars.
Well, my first car was a Oldsmobile Delta 88 with a 350, and that thing was so easy to fix.
My first car was a Volkswagen Beetle. I bought it for $100. It was black. Each of the 4 fenders was a different color. And yeah, you could just fix those things and keep them running. And I rebuilt the engine, and I had it painted green, and I was going to drive that car forever. But then that gosh darn Chevy jumped the divider on Azusa Avenue and re-kitted my car, and I had to go out and buy this Buick Opal, which was the biggest mistake in my automotive life. We got to take a break for commercials. Welcome back to the show here, and for those of you watching on Justin TV, this gorgeous creature behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who is going to wait patiently and quietly while we finish up our phone call with George in Texas. George, you had one more thing you wanted to say.
About what's going on in Massachusetts, trying to blame the Muslims, the Tea Parties, the veterans, and any Constitution. Now they want to Russians, and now they got this excuse for security theater in Massachusetts and Connecticut. It just shows these systems get ready to crumble. And I'll tell you one thing: Obama signs executive orders to further try to restrict our Second Amendment rights. I really think he's going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of blowback this time.
Well, I know people have been pushed to the breaking point, and we're seeing on the corporate media where this complete, total lockdown of Watertown and its surrounding areas is continuing, where people are being kept in their homes, and they're trying to sell this as the correct, proper response, which means from now on, all they got to do is say, there's a terrorist in the neighborhood, get inside your homes, no schools, no jobs, no transportation, just stay in your homes, don't look out the windows, don't find the truth for yourself, just watch your TV, and you will be told what to believe. Anything else, George?
Well, the thing is, it was on America's Most Wanted. When I first moved to Texas, they had a prison escapee living out in the woods. And you know what the police told us have our guns locked and loaded by our doors.
Well, that's a good thing to do right now anyway.
Yeah, and it's like, the thing is, it's like this guy was trying to take over homes, and people with guns kept him out. He had to live out in the woods.
That's exactly right. And again, as we were going to talk about this later in the show, all these people talking about you only really need 7 rounds in your gun at one time, and there was a story about this police officer who ran out of ammunition shooting at a criminal, because unlike Hollywood movies and TV shows, when you shoot somebody with a gun, they don't always die immediately, even if you hit them in an area that will kill them eventually. They don't just fly back against the back of the set instantaneously. That's all Hollywood thinking. People who get shot, they go into shock and they keep on going, and they don't even realize they're actually in the process of dying, and they can still commit all kinds of mayhem. If they're on angel dust, it's even worse. The one time when I had to defend my life, it was against a guy on angel dust, and he was suffering all this huge damage, and he didn't even seem to notice. And that's another reason for Americans to have high-capacity magazines and powerful weapons. We have a legitimate right to keep and bear arms equal to, if not superior, to those in the hands of the criminals. Got to let you go here, George. We're coming up on station identification, and before the music starts, we're getting the story. Apparently an 8th grader has been arrested and charged for some kind of a crime that's not really being said yet. He was wearing a Second Amendment T-shirt, and they arrested him. That is really, I think, one of the scariest things I have seen come down the wire in a long time, where a kid, an 8th grader, wears a T-shirt talking about the Second Amendment, and he's arrested? That is just insane. Got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with the lovely Lady Claire. America, welcome back to the show. And before I turn the microphone over to the lovely Lady Claire, a couple of things. We're watching the stock market, and as is usual, the powers that be, the plunge protection team, the high-frequency traders, are massaging the stock market to get their traditional Friday happy ending, and looks like they're going to get it, only just. Another story that I wanted to mention before we go on to Claire's topics is a story that kind of came and went behind all this Boston bombing, manhunt, and the rest of it, and that is that a nonpartisan independent review of the interrogation and detention programs conducted by the United States government after September 11th concluded it is indisputable that the United States engaged in the practice of torture, and the nation's highest officials bear ultimate responsibility for it. Yes, you live in a nation with a government that tortures people to get politically expedient confessions. Now, admit it, you aren't really surprised because you listen to this show and you read my website. So, big shock, right? but it's basically out there. Yes, the United States government uses torture. What do you get with torture? Do you get real usable intelligence? No, you don't. Every intelligence agency says torture does not get you accurate information. It gets you whatever the person being tortured thinks you want to hear to stop the torture. You get confessions. It took, 183 waterboardings to get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to admit that he did 9/11. I think if we waterboarded any of you 183 times, we could get you to confess to blowing up the Hindenburg, shooting down the Columbia and the Challenger, assassinating Lincoln Kennedy, and personally nailing Jesus to the cross. So on that subject, we're going to turn over here to the lady. Claire, what do you want to talk about first?
Well, first I have a segment that I'm going to call the United States Dubious Distinction. And this was a UNICEF study that indicated that child poverty in America is the highest in the developed world. 1 out of 7 kids lives in poverty in this
Well, we have a
country.
solution for that. They just march them down to that local military recruiter, and we've got plenty of work for them. And they get to play with guns.
Yeah, it breaks my heart. And I mean, you and I know about this personally because of our involvement with the local food distribution program that we both are involved with. And it looks like the demographic is getting younger and those lines are getting longer.
Yeah, that's something we have been seeing. It's trending. When we first got involved with this food distribution program, it was mostly older people, people who were either at or close to retirement, and Social Security and their pensions weren't covering the rising cost of food. We know the food stamp money runs out in week number 3. We were involved at a local grade school providing food baskets to those kids in families where the food stamps are running out in week number 3. But over time, we're seeing younger and younger people coming to these food distribution programs, families with children, families who've lost their jobs and there is no other work here. And again, when the part that most of these money junkies talking about austerity don't seem to realize is when you tell the government to fire all of these workers who take care of the roads and schools and hospitals, there are no other jobs for them to go to. So they go hungry. They stop paying tax revenues. Cyprus just realized that. They went along with the austerity plan. Now they're looking at something like a 20 billion euro shortfall because all those people who were working, taking care of the country and its people, are now out of work. And so the tax revenues just fell right off the cliff.
Absolutely. I'd like to segue now into something I thought very interesting. Apparently, President Obama is refusing to send the Senate a witness to explain his drone strikes.
All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and that's a very important situation, especially as we talk about drones versus Boston. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to Claire and this issue over the drone strikes, I have 2 listener emails I want to talk about. The first one says, can you, over the air, make a plea to suspect number 2 to call the media, tell his story before they kill him, because he will never be taken alive, and he should go public any way he can to blow the cover up, to blow the cover story. The second email is saying, would patsies drive down the road hurling grenades and hijack a car? No, they wouldn't, but somebody pretending to be those guys would do it to attract a lot of attention and to sell the idea that they're dangerous crazies. Think back to the Kennedy assassination and all the phony Oswalds that were going around, to the shooting ranges, saying intentionally provocative things, trying to be remembered. They had a phony Oswald down in Mexico City at the Cuban embassy. And so this is part of selling the idea these are the bad guys. Remember, when that car got hijacked last night, the 2 guys who hijacked that car, the first thing they told the driver is, we're the Boston Bombers. Why would they say that unless the goal was to have this driver then say to the police and the media, oh, it was the Boston Bombers who took my car? So you got to start thinking, about these things and not just have a knee-jerk reaction to whatever the TV news is telling you. Now, Claire wants to talk about Obama's digging in his feet regarding explaining the legal justification under the Constitution for the United States of America for these drone strikes all over the world. And I want to remind everybody of something very simple. What happened in Boston was a tragedy. 3 innocent people were killed. Every time, every single time that Obama orders a drone strike into Yemen, Pakistan, wherever, an average of 50 innocent people are killed for every one suspected terrorist. And when I say suspected, I mean these are people who have not had their day in court, for which there has been no evidence proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt has been presented. They've not been allowed to mount a defense. They do not have their trial by jury.
And Mike, there's another issue we need to look at here. And this is one that concerns me greatly. I am very concerned that the drone strikes that we've been seeing in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen are not going to stay in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Yemen.
I would tend to agree. They're already talking about drones across the United States of America.
Yep.
If Obama feels he can carry out a drone strike anywhere on planet Earth, obviously we're part of planet Earth.
Yep.
And they'll just say, there's a terrorist in the area, stay inside, don't look at who we're bombing. They drop a bomb.
And in Houston, about a year and a half ago, they have already purchased weaponizable drones.
Well, that's now happening all across the country. There are these big drones where they can mount shotguns, taser guns, grenade launchers on these things and fly over a crowd and just indiscriminately open fire on the mass American people. These are not precision weapons.
Yeah.
They're billed as such. We're told that these drone strikes are only getting the guilty. We know that's a complete lie. It's a complete lie by the same U.S. government that sold us Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, and the same U.S. government that was saying we're not torturing anybody. And now we know, obviously, the truth.
I have never felt more like I'm living in the world of V for Vendetta than this last week. And if there are any in our audience listening or viewing who have not seen this film, please do yourself a favor. Rent it, get it through whatever resource you do. It is a very brilliant expression of what goes on in a repressive society and how the repression is ultimately stopped.
It is. It's a brilliant, brilliant movie. What is next on your list?
Well, there are a couple of things that are really intertwined. Number one is the moving of the Patriot missile launchers to the Jordanian-Syrian border.
Okay, now when you say moving, they're sending additional Patriots to the Jordan border.
Yes.
The Patriots along the Turkish border are still there.
Yes.
Look at a map. Okay, the entire sky above Syria is now, for all intents and purposes, a no-fly zone because the Patriots from Turkey can control the upper third of the country. The Patriots from Jordan's border can control a little more than the lower third of Syria, including over Damascus. And this is obviously a precursor to a ground invasion. We know the United States has sent armed troops to the Jordanian border. They're just going to go ahead and invade.
Yeah.
We're living in the Fourth Reich, nation after nation after nation being conquered.
And the other thing that is intertwined with this, diplomats say Iran and the UN agency are going to have agreed to meet middle of next month to try a new start on questions about Iran's nuclear program. And Mike, as sure as I'm sitting here in our studio, I would be willing to bet real money that these talks are going to be engineered to fail. And let me explain why I say that. Apparently, last year, President Obama made Netanyahu some kind of promise that if negotiation hadn't worked, that the U.S. is going to invade Iran by June. You're seeing the meetings get set up for a failure, and last year it was reported in the Times of Israel that Obama had given Netanyahu an assurance that if diplomacy hadn't worked, that the U.S. would be invading by June.
And, of course, the diplomacy is being sabotaged. The U.S. approach to this whole thing is Iran must do everything we say first, and then maybe, if we're in a good mood, we will reduce the sanctions. Iran's sticking point is they have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. So has the United States. What Iran wants to do what Iran wants is for the United States to honor their obligations under that treaty. And that means the right to peaceful uses of nuclear technology. And again, Iran is not a threat to anybody. Even if they had a nuclear weapon, they're not going to use it against the United States of America. They're not going to use it against Israel because the result would be instant nuclear annihilation.
Right.
Okay? Now, Iran is not in the habit of starting these wars. They have not invaded another country in a war of conquest in over 200 years. This is just more USDA choice bovine excrement to convince you that you have got to throw your babies onto the Iranians' bayonets. The real goal for Israel, of course, is removing a political threat to its power in the region. The goal for the United States of America is to force Iran to only sell their oil for U.S. dollars and to destroy Iran's state-controlled central bank and give them a brand new private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest.
And the other thing we have to be aware of in terms of June, this is when the Iranian elections are supposed to happen as well, middle of the month.
Now, that's a good time to start a lot of chaos here.
Yeah.
And we're seeing all this chaos down in Bolivia and Venezuela.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anytime the people of a nation vote in a government that's going to serve the people, by golly, we've got to save those poor people from that evil tyrant. And that was what they were saying back in 2009 when they were trying to gin up a coup d'etat in Iran. And it fell flat on its face when the new proposed U.S.-approved puppet regime started waving around the flag of the Shah of Iran. And that's the point where all the Iranian people dug in their heels and said, we're not going back to that.
Nope, definitely not.
We are absolutely not.
And the problem with the U.S. strike against Iran, excuse me, is that we do not, the U.S. government doesn't have the troop strength, doesn't have the money or the manufacturing to ensure a successful outcome.
Especially if Russia and China come in on the other side, as both nations have indicated they will do.
Yeah.
They do not want to go back to Bretton Woods. They do not want to go back to a world where everybody has to go through the U.S. dollar to conduct international business. We have already seen 10 of the world's top 20 economies form direct currency exchange deals with China. So they're dropping out from the dollar faster than the U.S. can conquer them. In the long run, this policy cannot possibly work, but the U.S. government has committed to this course of action because of pride, because of vanity, because of ego. They can't say, oh, we change our mind, we're going to turn around and go back to status quo ante. The reality is, without that dollarification of the world's resource-rich areas, the U.S. economy is going to collapse. We don't have the manufacturing. We're now a net importer of foods. Nobody wants to buy our GMO crops.
Nope.
It is a complete unmitigated disaster. And the U.S., as we have known it, is dying right before our eyes. Our real threat is that in its death throes, it may take the rest of the world with it.
There is a concept from classic Greek tradition, and it's the concept of hubris.
Okay.
And I think that there is a real national hubris going on with the leadership right now.
Yeah, it is. It's ego and vanity. We've never lost a war. I actually get that in the email an awful lot. We've never lost a war. Oh, do you remember Vietnam? And not all wars are over where you can say there are winners and losers. Certainly the attempted coup d'etat in 2009 in Iran was a failure. From the political, public relations sense, the war in Iraq was a failure because we were all told that war was about getting Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, which he did not have, to punish Iraq for 9/11, which we now have George W. Bush on videotape saying Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, and then it was all about Iraq's support for al-Qaeda, and then it came out that Iraq and al-Qaeda were ideological enemies, and the only evidence for a link between Iraq and al-Qaeda was a single confession tortured out of a gentleman by the name of Binyam Mohammed, which gets back to that whole thing that, yes, the U.S. government is using torture to get politically expedient confessions. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. And we'll aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I want to respond to a listener email. Do you think that if the United States attacks either Iran or Syria, the rest of the NATO countries have to help with this invasion? And the answer is that all of those NATO nations have private central banks who are all buddy-buddy with each other, and those other NATO nations have national economies that are entangled with the U.S. dollar. And so the answer is yes. When the United States goes into Syria and or Iran, The other NATO nations will participate, not to the same extent that they expect your kids to do, of course. And when Russia and China come in on the other side, it's going to get very ugly. Let's see. Back to... we've got a caller waiting on the line patiently. Let's take that. Robert in, I think that's Missouri. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. When I saw this morning that they're gonna play the patsies as these two Chechnyans, as that's what they are, right? Chechnyans?
Mm-hmm. They were born on the border of Chechnya.
Well, I thought of this. I thought of that time where Obama got caught on the hot mic with Medvedev, where he said, after I get reelected, I'll have much more leeway or freedom to do whatever they were talking about. And I was sitting there like, you know what? Maybe Obama owes them a false flag. Maybe they want to do an incursion into Chechnya. And I'm like, hey, what a convenient way for Russia to have an excuse to go kick some Chechnyan tail right now. What do you think about that?
Well, it's certainly good that you brought up that comment that Obama made.
Yes.
It certainly seems like he's taking advantage of that situation right now. Selling a new invasion of Chechnya based on these two kids is a bit of a reach because they didn't just arrive from Chechnya yesterday, nor is there the appearance of any kind of a connection between them and the Chechnyan government. These kids were very glad to be in America. They were trying to become Americans. Again, the older brother, Tamerlan, wanted to compete on behalf of the United States in the Olympics rather than Russia, even though he could have qualified on the team for either one of these countries. So it's a bit of a reach. I think, though, Russia is coming to understand that the United States represents a military threat, and I rather doubt the Russian government would be very happy about a strong U.S. military presence that close to their own borders.
Well, I was just saying more or less for the Russians if they had some agenda. But do you think there's a possibility down the line in the next few days that they're going to possibly try to tie these two to Iranian intelligence or something of that nature?
Anything is possible. They've tied it to North Korea. They've tied it to the NRA. They've tied it to global warming. It's just whatever they think they can get traction on. And all they do thrashing around like that is just further weaken their credibility because everybody's looking at the constantly changing stories and saying, we can't believe anything these bozos are saying. Whether it's CNN claiming there was an arrest, Reuters saying that George Soros had died, the New York Post, putting up the photos of the completely wrong guys. Okay?
Right. Now, what do you think about this one? Do you think that there's a possibility at this huge crowd in Boston that they had, like, plan A through E, like, to where it's like they had teams of people of all different ethnicities, and maybe they're on plan C right now because plan A was the white guy, and that somehow they found out that wasn't going to work, and plan B was somebody else. And this Chechnyan pair was just like, all right, we'll go ahead and blame these two. That wasn't really wanted, but we'll go ahead and blame these two.
Could very well be. I think everybody was trying to take advantage of the situation. And, we know as soon as the bombing happened, the Israeli media was saying it's Muslim. And then the Israeli police show up in Boston to help the investigation. And all of a sudden, these two convenient Muslims pop out of the woodwork and are demonized as the terrorists. But, again, looking at the background of these two kids, and all their friends and family and schoolmates are saying exactly the same thing. They are just not the type to do that. They loved being in America. And this dog is not hunting. Got to let you go, Robert. We're going to switch over real quick to Scott in Virginia. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Listen, I was just, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I was just reading over this Boston bombing and about the MIT police officer that's been shot.
Yes.
The first thing that came to mind was, this is our Officer Tibbet.
Yes.
This is it. We've been down this road before. We know the drill. We know what's coming next. It's just pathetic. It's just pathetic. It's pathetic that they think we're going to buy it, and it's pathetic that most of our fellow countrymen do.
I don't think the police officer at MIT was necessarily aimed at the public. I mean, this guy was in his car, shot multiple times. So he was not out of his car confronting anybody. And I think the reason he was killed was to convince the police forces these guys we're telling you to go after are dangerous, shoot on sight. I think that was the reason the MIT cop got killed.
To bring the law enforcement on board with a sham.
To basically bring the law enforcement on board with not giving these guys a chance to talk, to just shoot them dead on sight. That's what I think. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with Claire after these words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And a rather interesting comment following on the previous caller talking about the link to Chechnya. One of our members has posted an article to whatreallyhappened.com. The Chechen terrorist networks trace back to the U.S. State Department, but then ultimately, don't they all? Claire, what's next on your list of things to talk about?
Well, what is next is what is happening on state and city levels, because states and cities are broke. And some of the decision-making that is going on is a little bit bewildering. In the state of Nevada, they are busing literally hundreds of mentally ill patients to cities around the country, outside the state.
They're dumping them. We have a lot of people, many years ago when we were just starting to work with the homeless problem here in Hawaii. We got a huge homeless problem here. We found out from one of the state workers who were looking into why there were so many homeless people here in Hawaii that other cities on the mainland, smaller cities that only had a few homeless, they would buy these people a one-way ticket to Hawaii because they knew Hawaii, which tends to be politically very liberal, had a lot of social services to take care of the homeless when they walked out of the Honolulu airport. In point of fact, we don't have those social services anymore.
No,
they've been defunded, and that's why it's sort of fallen to ordinary people like ourselves to try and help deal with that situation.
And the other, apparently in the city of Detroit, police are dumping their homeless outside the city limits. You know, I look at these decisions and I think there has to be a surgical procedure of which I'm not really aware, but I'd call it a conscience-ectomy. Anyone making those decisions cannot possibly have a moral compass or a conscience. I mean, what happens to these people?
They're just looking at the ledgers, and they're saying, well, we're out of money. You know, we had to send another $200 million to Israel for Iron Dome to get that thing running, and governing is prioritizing, and governing is choosing, and we've got to prop up the Wall Street banks before we take care of the people. And that's basically the way they think. And Wall Street is probably the most generous campaign contributor for every election, and they're going to give their money to those politicians who are campaigning on a platform of, we're going to protect the banks and Wall Street no matter what. And that is why we have the best government that money can buy. Unfortunately, Wall Street outbid you.
Absolutely. But I just found myself looking at these stories and it was very difficult to get my head around that kind of thinking and the kinds of outcomes that these people are going to have. I mean, they're going to be lost, especially with Nevada's mentally ill. They're going to be terribly confused.
Or violent.
Or
violent. And, that is a reality of the homeless population, that various institutions for people who are born with organic brain damage or who've had their brains melted from a lifetime of prescription psychiatric medications, there's no money to take care of them. They just put them out on the streets, and it becomes part of the crime problem.
Yeah, it's just people are not thinking. And it's adding to the damage and the stress that everyone else is dealing with as well.
And we really don't know what the scale of the problem is, and I'll give you a good example here in Hawaii. The last couple of years especially, all the government is able to do is try and shoo the homeless out of those areas where the tourists are likely to see them. There's a huge homeless encampment down here by the center lock of Pearl Harbor. It became a national scandal when Dog the Bounty Hunter went in there looking for a fugitive. And it took them 5 days to search the entire homeless camp, and it made it national news. And Hawaii was saying, we have to keep this out of the eyes of the tourist buying public. We know that many of the homeless have now basically moved into the jungle areas, the watershed, And we've noticed that the wild feral chickens are on the verge of extinction here. When we first moved here all those years ago, these wild feral chickens were everywhere, and they're gorgeous birds. The missionaries and the whalers, when they came to Hawaii, they brought chickens to give to the Hawaiian kings and queens, who apparently didn't realize they were supposed to eat them. They thought they were pets. And so they just let them run around, and they bred, and it's a huge population, just like the feral cats that escaped from the whaling ships.
And it's not only just homeless individuals, Mike. It's homeless families.
It's entire families,
including
including children.
Yeah.
And it is amazing. One of the things when we were shooting that video for Make the World a Better Place, one of the things that was very obvious is these children are living in these horrible circumstances, and yet they're very resilient. They're still smiling and playing, and maybe they just don't understand how fragile their existence is, and hopefully they will grow up without a huge amount of mental scars. Do you have anything else you want to share with us?
I think that was it for this morning.
All right, I'm going to pull down your microphone. We're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. We're going to go to Dan in Texas. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I haven't heard any news really since about 7:45, but are you telling me there's a news report that says these guys told the people when they hijacked the car that they were the Boston bombers?
Yeah, that was being reported last night, just before I went to bed, when CNN was showing the arrest of the naked man who seems to have the same well-muscled physical build as Tamerlan did. They were saying the reason that they'd gone off in this direction looking for these people was that there had been a car hijacking, and the people who hijacked the car told the driver, "We're the Boston bombers."
Which makes absolutely no sense at all.
No, it doesn't. Unless somebody else hijacked the car to try and sort of build this growing pattern of crime and violence to get the police ready to shoot first and ask questions later.
And then I guess when they robbed the 7-Eleven, perhaps they told the clerk, "Give us your money, we're the Boston bombers."
Well, it looks like, one of the things that's so funny about the picture that they have from the 7-Eleven, it looks very obviously processed. And it could very well be that these guys just went in there to get something and the story was spun. We don't really know. I think the only thing that we can say with any certainty is that we should not trust anything that's coming out about this story from the corporate media. They're putting out a lot of propaganda. They're going out on the net and they're trying to shut down any contrary viewpoints about these kids. We were reporting that earlier in the show. The website showing photos of Tamerlan working out for his Golden Gloves and being with his girlfriend, he was walking away from his Mercedes, and just looks like a regular guy. That website has now been taken down. INFOWARS is reporting that they are unable to post any more stories about Kraft International to Facebook. They're immediately deleted. We know that one Russia Today video about the aunt saying that these kids could not have done, it was the father's comments, is now no longer available inside the United States of America, and Russia Today has never done that. So I don't think it's Russia Today. I think it's they're just trying to keep this one official story before the public, and I think these very overt actions of online censorship means that they're in a panic. The public isn't buying this. Every one of the friends and family and teachers and fellow students they've had on the corporate media are all saying the same thing. We don't believe these kids could have done these horrible crimes. And I've noticed that CNN has stopped having these interviews with family and friends now, and they're back to simply recycling all the video from last night. So, again, if we operate on the idea that these two kids were told to meet somebody at MIT to get some kind of assistance or help, or maybe turn themselves in so they weren't going to be killed, and then somebody shoots a police officer to get the police department in that mindset of, we're dealing with cop killers, we have to shoot on sight. And this thing with the hijacked car, getting in there and saying, we're the Boston bombers, it just reminds me so much of all the false Oswalds that were running around Dallas before the John F. Kennedy assassination to sort of build up his character as a crazy who could kill the president.
Right. All right. Thank you.
All right. We're going to switch to Ed in Connecticut. Aloha, Ed. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, you were talking about people taking care of people over there in Hawaii and people getting shoved out of their different towns and whatnot because they don't like the people being there as far as being vagrants and sleeping around and not being able to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are knocking North Korea because all they're doing is building war toys, but you just said something about the banks are gaining all the money, and all we're doing is spending money on war toys to send over to Israel and all these different countries. So we're basically doing the same thing as North Korea.
Yeah, but you see, it's good when the United States does it, and it's bad when anybody else does it.
It's BS.
You don't want the terrorists to win, do you? Anything else?
Thing is, these poor Chesnian kids, I don't know. I think they were totally set up to help on this situation of this exercise, and they got played.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
If they get killed, we'll never know the real truth. And I still think the government is totally behind it.
I tend to agree. At this point, I think last night CNN was saying that the naked guy that they had on video was Tamerlan, and he was put in the police car in perfect health. And then this morning you wake up and, oh, he's dead, he was shot, his younger brother ran over him. See what an evil person the younger brother is. And I agree. It just looks like they picked a couple of patsies and they're playing them, and they're not getting traction with it. Certainly what I'm seeing in the email, the obvious propagandists aside,
Right.
the American people aren't buying this thing. The American people no longer accept what the government and the corporate media says at face value. They have become skeptical. And like I said earlier in the show, in response to all those people saying, really, you should trust the government and give them the benefit of the doubt, if the U.S. government and the corporate media are dealing with a tremendous crippling crisis of credibility, it is their own fault for all the lies they have used to rule us and deceive us and trick us throughout generation after generation. Global warming, Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, all of it has come back to haunt them. Nobody wants to be made a fool of yet another time. Remember, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's really where we are right now. Going to let you go, Ed. Going to grab another phone call. Matt in New Mexico. Aloha, Matt. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. My name is Matt. Just call in to let you know that, there are a lot of young people who listen to you. I'm 29 years old.
Good for you.
Listening to you since I was 21. I was going to join the military before I started listening to you. And, just through learning the truth, I decided not to sign up.
Well, good.
I used to listen to CNN, Fox News. I was an Obama supporter. And you know what? Anything they say these days, I just don't believe it. Including what happened in Boston. We all see the signs. The debate shouldn't be whether or not terrorists did it, but what are they going to do in the aftermath of this? What do they plan on doing? What freedoms do they plan on taking away from us?
All of them eventually. And then, like I said, I am surprised that they haven't already come out and said, oh, these two kids, they had assault weapons, they had this, and the gun grabbers are already trying to use this to license and regulate sales of black powder or any gun propellant. There's probably going to be a new push for taggants in gunpowder, which is going to wear out your guns a lot faster. Registration, background check just to buy reloading supplies. They're just going to keep on pushing on every one of these civil rights that we have, because as long as the Constitution and the Bill of Rights stands, they can't control us all. I think...
not only can they not control us, but, they want to... they want to take everything from us, including our money. And as long as the American people are armed, they can't do that. Every single act of terrorism, or so-called act of terrorism, that we've seen lately, all goes back to the banks.
Yes.
They need money. They need to save themselves. The best way is to stick their hands in our pockets, and you cannot rob an armed person, whether you do it through a bank whether, whatever form they are looking for, not take us. They cannot take our money that way, As long
Well,
as
they're going to take it out of the banks the way they did in Cyprus. We may come to the point, in fact, I think it's almost inevitable, especially if they succeed in getting most of the guns, they will confiscate the physical gold from the American people, like Roosevelt did back in 1993. And they'll give you stacks of paper and ink things in exchange for the gold, so you'll just take that home and you'll feel all good about, what you've got just before the paper and ink stuff starts getting into Zimbabwe territory. Got to let you go here. We're running out of time. We're almost at the end of the show. I got a bunch of things I got to cover here. I'm watching this very bizarre duopoly on CNN right now. We're down in the lower third. They're talking about statements made by the mother of these two boys, basically saying they were very religious, they were very peaceful. They never talked about anything violent. They never talked negative about the United States of America. After their very hard early upbringing over in Chechnya and Kyrgyzstan and that whole area, they were absolutely delighted to be in the United States, like they had died and gone to heaven. And she too is saying, it just doesn't make sense they're in there. And then above it, they've got Peter King, who's out there saying, this country took them in and gave them a home, and saying, how could they do this to the country that was so kind to them? Well, Peter, I don't think they did it. And right now, I don't think very many Americans think they did it. The only ones going along with the official story is the official government and the corporate-owned media, and they have burned themselves so many times this last week with false reports about arrests, wrong suspects, and the rest of it. I don't think America's buying it this time. If you thought this was going to be the new 9/11, where 90% of America would buy the official story, you didn't get it. You did not get it. And I want to remind everybody, among all the laws of the United States of America, certainly the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and everything they've added on ever since then, there is no law that says you have to believe anything the United States government tells you. And remember that Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit, where the courts ruled that because there is no law requiring the corporate media to tell you the truth about anything, the corporate media can legally lie to you. They can order their journalists to lie to you, and if the journalist refuses to lie, they can be legally fired. And that tells you right there and then why you should not accept anything coming out of that box full of wires and lights at face value. Going to take a break for our last commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And a quick word about gold. Gold's price is going back up again. A huge gap has opened between the price for physical bullion for silver and gold and those paper futures contracts. The paper commodities prices are an absolute disaster. Physical is dragging it back up. It's back up over 1,400. If the goal of this gold and silver price smashdown was to scare the people of the world to dumping their physical in exchange for pieces of paper with colorful ink all over it, it has failed. It has sparked a run on physical. Shortages reported everywhere. Dealers are paying premium prices to get physical in. They're charging premium prices to sell it. So now's the time to be buying in Republic Trading Group, Republic Trading Group, Republic Trading Group. And finally, I want to close on a comment I just got on the email talking about the 29-year-old who called in, said he'd been listening to the show for 9 years, decided not to go into the military because of what he was learning out here in the independent media. I cannot tell you how this kind of thing is just absolutely delighting me. Like the young man who called in 2 days ago, like the video of these kids talking about the Currency Act. And it's obvious they get it, because it means our next generation is clued in. They understand the reality of this nation and its government is not what they are taught it is in those state-controlled schools. And that is one of the most wonderful things that I've seen in a long time, because for a lot of the years when I was running the website and doing the radio show, our demographic tended to be people of my age. And I certainly appreciate the audience, every one of you who are out there who help spread the word of Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com. But if what we know, what we've learned, dies with our generation, then it will have all been for nothing. And so when I start seeing that the young kids are picking up on this, the young kids know about the true nature of private central banking, they understand the true reasons for these wars they're being asked to risk their life and limb in, it tells us we have succeeded. We have opened the door to a better future for the people of the United States of America, because the kids are getting it. And that, I think, that is just the most wonderful thing I have heard in a really, really long time. So we're coming up on the end of the show here. There were so many other things I wanted to talk about. I'm just going to have to hold them over on to Monday, and we'll get back to all of that stuff. Stories about, do you know how many former Israeli intelligence operatives are now working for those hedge funds? That ought to tell you why there's a complete lack of morality on those entities. It's all about the money. I don't care what I have to do. Cheat people, kill people, start a war. As long as I get money, it's okay. And I'm not opposed to making money. I'd like to make a lot of money myself. But there are things I will not do to accomplish that goal. And as a whole, as our society, we have to balance our priorities. Yes, we want to make money, but we want to make sure our infrastructure is intact, that everybody has the opportunity to have a good life, to take care of those in need who are harmed, to make sure that the products that we produce in our gardens and our factories are not detrimental to the people whose money we are taking in exchange for them. We need to rebalance society. The acquisition of wealth should not be our God. That's it for our show. We're going to head on out of here. We got to go over and get some food for the Hungry program. We'll be back on Monday. Please share what you know with who you know. Spread the word about whatreallyhappened.com and Republic Broadcasting. We need to grow our audience and reach people ready to listen who have not yet heard. Aloha, America.